Hi guys, in the previous tutorial we created user authentication route endpoint in our API, and in this tutorial we are going to create user authorization endpoint in our API so that every time user requests some private routes, we can authorize whether user is the one that they say they are before we allow them to access resources. Before we jump into the coding, I wanted to show you this workflow, how we're going to do our user authorization routes. So basically what's going to happen is that client will make a request with the JWT header, and then in our API server we're going to check if the JWT sent by client with the header is valid or not. If it is not valid, we will respond the 403 status forbidden message back to client, and if it is valid, then again we will go and check if the token is exist in database or not. If it is not exist in Redis database, then again it's not valid, so we're going to respond 403 again. And if the token is exist in Redis database, then we will extract the user ID, which will be basically stored in the Redis database as a JWT as a key and user ID as a value. We'll get the user ID from there and we'll access the resources that is requested by the client. We'll respond back to the client with the data. So that's what is the workflow going to be. Hey, if you are here for the first time, I'm Prerequisite from Dented Code. I create tutorial related to full stack development. If you are interested in full stack development, please subscribe the channel and turn on all the notifications. With that saying, let's jump into the computer. Okay guys, this is where we left up last time and we're going to continue from here. As per our documentation, we're going to get the user info by requesting this URL, and it's going to be the protected one. So okay, in here we are not going to send any ID, rather we're just sending this, and we are going to send this access JWT token as a authorization header, and based on that one we will verify if this user is authorized or not, and if the user is authorized, then we'll get the user profile. Okay, so let's work on that. The first thing we need user b1/user. So let's copy this. I'm just gonna copy the sign-in person and I'll do this here. Now this one going to be get a user profile endpoint, where we only go to b1/user, and we don't need content type because this is to be the get method. And here what we're gonna need is the authorization header, and in authorization header we will pass this JSON web token, and we don't need any data, so just like that. So if you send the request now, we will get the error saying the is not found because we haven't created this endpoint in our API server. So let's save this file and let's go to the user.router, and here we have post request where we created user, and we have login router where user can log in and get the access token from here. So under here I'm gonna do create a get user profile router, and we're going to just do the router that get method, and that's gonna be just the /. So actually I want to put this one next to the post method. So actually we put on the top of the post method. So we only putting // here because even though we are making request to b1/user router, this is gonna hit our app.js file, and as long as we have b1/user, the app.js file has this router set up here. So the Express will catch up this route here and pass all the request data to this file here, user router, which is this file that we are going to work. So, okay, here we're going to have request and response again. Response, and let's presume we have this user data. Just gonna copy this and just let's make it const user equals to, let's paste this data for now, just a dummy data. Let's assume that this one coming from database, for example. Yeah, and we will let's say user is requesting this is user profile. Now we will simply say res.json because we are going to send the JSON format and send the user and save the file. And if we go to our res.http and do the request down here, now we can get the user. So this is kind of we have created the endpoint for getting user, but there is a problem. If we just, let's say for example, this data is actually coming from database, that means anybody who has this router can get the user profile without any problem. So that's a problem, because now we should be able to make sure the request coming from here is authorized before we access to the actual user data. So that's what we are going to create, the user authorization. So to do that, let's go start creating the user authorization middleware. Okay, let's create the middleware folder inside the src folder. I'm gonna say middlewares folder, and inside there I'm gonna create a file called authorization.middleware.js. So I'm saying authorization.middleware.js. You can put any file name you like here. And what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna create a function called, say, const user authorization, and we're going to get that JWT. So I'm gonna say user JWT, and this is the function, arrow function again, and just make sure we're receiving the JWT log user JWT, and let's export this file out of here. So simply do module.export, and I'm gonna export as non-default like so, and we are going to import this user authorization function in our user router. Let's go up here, and inside there we don't need this one. I'm not sure where it came from, just remove that if you have it. So I'm gonna say const import the user authorization, you do require, and just simply pass the file path. So that's going to be in middleware plus authorization middleware.js. We don't need to type .js. So now we are going to call this function in our method here, but instead of calling inside, we are going to pass it here as a middleware. You see this comma. So what happens with the express router is that the first parameter you provide is always the router that express catches, and inside here you can provide the series of middleware. So if you have multiple middleware, this one, let's say for example this is one middleware, you can say this two middleware, you can put as many as you want. So the way it works is that first it catches the routes and it goes through this middleware, and if you want to pass the request to the another middleware, you can pass the request to this middleware from this one. If you don't want to pass the request to the next middleware, you can simply response client back from this middleware. So let me remove this for now. So here we have one middleware, and if we pass forward our middleware, it will catch here and then execute this function. So what we're gonna do, we're going to do all the test and check here to make sure that the user is verified and authorized, okay, based on the JSON Web Token that is coming in the header. Okay, now let's go to the function, and let's save this file. Let's go to this middleware, and here we will not have JSON Web Token. Since this is the middleware, we are going to receive the same like a request, response, and the next option. I'm going to tell you about the next in a second. So from request header, what we can get is the authorization. We can simply do request dot headers, and here now we can simply do console log, and we can even response return to like client from here. So we can simply say rest.json. You can even send the, let's say, authorization header for now. Save that. So now what we should be getting is this authorization token here. Let's send the request and see what happens. There you go. So when we do send request, so you can see in the console as well as in our response with 200, now we are getting the same user authorization header, which is the JSON Web Token we send from the client. So that means, and we are responding from here. That means we terminate the middleware which we were calling from here. So we terminate the request from here only. But if you want to pass and forward the request to this function, we can simply pass next. See the next parameter coming here. Instead of doing that, we can do next, call the function, and it will forward the middleware to the next function. So what we can do here is that if user is authorized, send to the next middleware. Otherwise, we say here simply rest.json status. Status, I'm gonna say 403, and then plus JSON, I'm gonna say message forbidden. Okay, So if the authorize is not valid, we will respond the client from here with a forbidden message. If authorization is authorized, if authorization is valid, then we go here. So we're going to do a few things. What we're going to do here, first we're going to verify if JWT is valid, and we're going to check if JWT is existing in Redis. If that happens, then we will extract the user ID and get user profile based on the user ID. So this part we will do in the user router here, but until 1, 2, 3 we will do in this authorization. So if all this okay, not even third one, if these two part valid, then the route can go ahead and then get the user ID and then get the user profile. If not, we will simply respond saying that forbidden. So let's work on that. So before anything else, we're going to need our to call the function to verify the JSON Web Token. So we're going to call, let's see. So first we need to go to the JSON Web Token, jwt.helper.js, and here we will create a function that helps us to verify if the token is verified or not. So simply do const verify access JWT, and we're gonna have a token, and this is again arrow function, and I'm gonna run in try catch. So the function we can verify JWT is that we have already defined the JWT and imported here. So simply we go here and say JWT.verify method. Inside verify method, we need to pass two parameters. The first one is the token itself, and the second parameter is the secret key that we used when we creating the token. So this function created the token that we received. So create access JWT, and here you can see we have process.m.access JWT secret coming from our .env file, which is, so let's go and now go down to our function and pass that secret key. So what happens if the user is verified, it will return the it will decode the JSON Web Token and provide the payload, that data we have used and included in our JSON Web Token. If it is not verified, then it will throw an error. So here I'm simply gonna say we're going to return the promise. Okay, so we do return promise dot, I'm gonna do resolve, since this is the error going to throw by the JSON Web Token if the token is invalid. So simply say send error here, and if everything is okay, we can send whole thing, return that one. So I'm gonna say return, again do promise dot resolve, and inside let's pass whole decode function and save that, and let's export this function and save the file, and let's go to our authorization middleware, and here let's import that recently created function, which is verify access JWT from require from our helpers and JWT helper. And now we can call this function in our here. We can simply say, I'm gonna say decoded, because this function will decode the JSON Web Token and return the data if it is valid. Otherwise, if it is not valid, then it will simply throw an error. So if decode is coming as a data, we will have email here, because I'm gonna show you in a second. Bye. So let's console this log out for now. Okay, and let's do the request. It might throw an error, but that's fine. Okay, forbidden, because if you check in our error message, don't worry about this one, I'll show you that one later. The actual error I'm interested in is JWT expire, so which means our JSON Web Token is only valid for 15 minutes, so it was created more than 15 minutes ago. So let's go and create the new one. So let's do login again. Now we have the fresh pair of token, copy that, and let's pass this new token now. And let's go to our console, go to the bottom, and let's do send. There you go. Now we have the data, it's decoded. They say we have the email and the initiated date when the token was created, and this one is the expiry date. So This one, what it's saying is that if you ever get this message, error header sent, cannot send set header after they are sent. So basically what it's saying is that we are doing returning the client twice. So here we are doing res.send, like responding back to client, and also we are running next, and which is here doing the rest.json, which is replying back to client. So you can only respond client once. So that was the error, so don't worry about that. So I just wanted to show you, when you decode, this is what we have. So not that one, sorry. This is what we have. So that means we have an email. So if we have email, then the code is valid. So this test is done. So now what we can do, now let's check if JWT is exist in Redis database or not. So for that, let's go to our Redis helper. Here we have the get JWT, which was created earlier in the previous tutorial. So let's call this function in our authorization middleware. I'm gonna say const get JWT require Redis helper. So just say get JWT require Redis helper, and now we can call this function again from here because this token is valid. Now let's do const. We're gonna get user ID. I'm gonna show you in a second. We're going to wait and call this function, and we're going to pass the JSON web token. So I'm gonna show you here. Let's quickly run our Redis CLI. So I am in the Redis database. So if I use this the JSON web token that we send with our user request here, if I do get that token, I'm gonna get this user ID, which is exist in our database. So this is the user ID. That means the way we are saving this JSON web token in Redis database is that we are using key as a JWT as a key and the user ID as a value. So if we run this function here, we're going to get the user ID if it is existing database. So now let's call database and then see if we have a console.log just to show you user ID here. Here let's do if not user ID, right? Then now we can simply say this, we can forward this one. I'm gonna take it out from here and say if token is valid but the user is not existing in the Redis database, we're going to say okay, it's not valid, sorry, it's forbidden, and then we were going to do the next thing. So let me go down again. I'll just quickly go through it. Yeah, first we are getting the authorization header, we don't need console, and then we are decoding, and if we have a decoded data, that means we should have email in our decode data, and if we have email, that means the token is verified, and if token is verified, then we are going to check if the token is stored in our Redis database, and if so, we will have a user data. So if we don't have a user data, that means the token is no longer valid. We will respond customer with the 4.3 status code. If we have an email and we do have a user ID as well, then we are going to do next here. There you go. And we also need to respond this forbidden here, return here, so that we don't run twice, and put return here and return. Now, so we will have a user right here. So what we can do here is that since we have a user ID, now we can send the user ID as a property of the request here. So simply we do here request dot, let's say user ID equals to pass this user ID, so that in the next middleware we can access this user ID, so that we don't have to make another call to database. So decode. So let's save that, and let's go to our user.router. So if everything goes good, by the time we receive here, the user must be authorized, and if so, now we should have a user ID in our request.user ID, which is again we are assigning here. Okay, entity, save the file, and now let's respond back to client and save this file and do the request again. I'm gonna see if there is any error as well. Okay, app is crashed because okay, we got forbidden. Let's see what's the error. Okay, we cannot call await unless we have make the function async. So let's go to the JWT function, which is in our inside the user here. Okay, here you go. This is where we calling await. So we are not allowed to do that unless we make this function async function. So just do that simply and should fix the error. Let's go at the bottom and let's do the request again. There you go, there is no error. Okay, we're still getting forbidden. Let's see why. So first we go to our user router. We are not coming up to this point because our user router here we got thrown as a forbidden because key is not valid. So one of two reasons happens here. So either the token is not valid, which must be valid because we just created it. The other one is we don't have a user ID coming from the auth request. So I'm going to here go to get auth and see what's there. We are passing key. Oh, here you go. So we are getting the key here, but instead of passing the key as a parameter, we're passing the key string. That's why we are not getting the values. So let's send again one more forbidden. So let's see what else is the I'm gonna do is let's see decoded email, if it has email or not. Let's do tool.log. I'm gonna do decode again and see if there is email or not. Yes, okay, it's coming as a double object. If you see here, we are receiving promise itself, not only data. That means let's go to the function that we are receiving data and doing console log. I think it's on the authorization middleware. This is the console logging. This is the one. Oh, okay, here see the verify access JWT. We are receiving the promises, but we are not waiting here. So you need to pass away so that it will convert that promise into a data. So now if we save that and then send another request, see another request, send it. There you go. Now we have a data coming and we have a user ID. We got the user. So what happened here? So we have passed through this test. We don't need this now. We have our token is valid. There is an email and the token is existing database, and we have user ID, and if we don't have user ID, we send as a forbidden. Otherwise, we have user ID, which we added into our request header and forward our router to the next middleware, which comes to our user.router on the get method of the users. And since this authorization testing and are doing next, if every test is passed, so we're gonna hit this function, and again now from this request, now we can access that user.id we forwarded to. So we don't need this one now, since we have I'm gonna say const underscore id equals to I'm gonna say request dot user id, and we are going to now call database. So now this part is done, right? So this third and fourth part will be doing here. So now we have user id, and based on user id we are going to get the user profile. So let's create a function. Sorry, let's call a function. Let's say const user profile equals to, let's await and say get user. We don't have this function yet. We're going to create in our module, user module. So get user by ID, and we're going to pass this user ID. We just got it from our previous middleware, and we're going to response this user back to the client for now. And I'm gonna copy this get user by ID, and let's go to our user.model here. See, we have already get user by ID. So I'm gonna just export that function, but we haven't created yet. Now let's go to get user by ID, and we just make a copy of it. This function, make the copy of this, and make sure to rename it to get user by email, and we just pass simply ID because we are going to receive ID parameter. And if there's no ID again, we're going to return false and leave everything there. So instead of find one, yeah, user.find one by ID. If we have data, we will get data and resolve the data. If not, we'll have error, we will resolve the error. Let's save that and go back, and we need to import that get user by ID on the top of the file somewhere. So let's see if we have user model already. Yeah, we have that. Okay, I'm gonna pass get user by ID here. The error should be fixed. Let me see why it's not. Because again, this await cannot be used unless the function is async. And now save it. The error is gone. And let's make the request now. So if all the token is valid, so we should receive the user profile. There you go, user refresh token, and the user ID, name, everything, including that password, hash password, which is exactly the same as this user here. You can simply confirm by the ID D74 or the password ends with DDS. You can check that here. Password ends with DDS and the ID is D74. There you go. Let's say you are sending the wrong, I'm just going to modify a little bit here and send with the wrong JSON web token, and if I send it, now we're going to get forbidden. So no way now user can get through the resources if they are not verified. So basically this is all you need to do to protect your private route. So the fundamental is that you always provide the middleware, where you simply going to do all your check. So you can do any other check you like, but here in our case we only want to make sure that the JSON web token is very valid and it is exists in database, and based on that one we will extract the user ID and then get the user profile and send back to user. So that is all for the user authorization, guys. So next time when you have, for example, few routes, let's go in our readme file. So we close this. So if you see here, we have okay, in the next tutorial probably we are going to work on all of this one. So they are all private. So every time user want to access to this route endpoint, make sure to call that same authorization middleware and check before they are allowed to access this endpoint. So now we have our middleware ready. Now we can call this one as many times as we want, as long as the use case is same. So next time you're gonna, for example, create the user router. Let's say you want to say next time, maybe if you want to, for example, create new post, simply you can call this create this endpoint and make sure to call this middleware before you do any other work. And then from there, if this one is valid, then you can continue doing the logic. Other than that, we simply reject the user request. Okay guys, so our user authorization part is done. Now I'm gonna just push this code for your reference. There you go guys, the code is available in the Git repo. So I'll put the Git repo link into the description below. Go check it out, and if you have any issue, always write me in the comment section and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching guys. If you like the tutorial, give me a thumbs up. You can also join me in Discord channel. I'll put the link to the Discord channel in the description below. And in the next tutorial guys, you already saw in this tutorial today, the token was expired few times. So what happens if, let's say, client sends the token and it is expired? So we need to create the API where client can request the refresh token. So we will going to create the API token API endpoint where user can request for fresh pair of access JSON web token, and also if the refresh token is expired, then we will force them to do the login so that we can create the new pair of refresh token as well. So that's what we are going to do in the next tutorial guys. If you are interested in that, please subscribe the channel if you haven't already and turn on all the notification, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.